Before we begin, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss future journeys like this one. Welcome to Sleeponomics, where the quiet side of business history comes to life. Here, we explore the slow, thoughtful evolution of companies and ideas that shape the world, far from the noise and rush of breaking news. These are stories told not with urgency, but with care. Stories meant to ease your mind, even as they deepen your understanding. Tonight, we follow the journey of a young woman from Perth, Australia, who quietly built one of the most widely used creative tools in the world. Without headlines, without Silicon Valley connections, and without early funding, she reshaped how millions of people think about design. This is the story of Melanie Perkins and the creation of Canva, a browser-based platform that would come to challenge the giants of the design software world. But this isn't just a startup story. It's a lesson in simplicity, timing, and quiet persistence. Canva's rise wasn't built on hype, but on intuition, and on understanding that creativity should belong to everyone, not just the technically skilled. We'll trace the path from early frustrations to global impact, from local print projects to a multi-billion-dollar platform used in over 190 countries. And it all begins in a place most people have never visited, Perth, on the remote western edge of Australia. It was the mid-2000s. Melanie Perkins was a 19-year-old university student studying communications and commerce. To earn extra money, she began tutoring fellow students in design programs like Adobe Photoshop and InDesign. But what struck her wasn't how popular these tools were. It was how often they led to confusion. Students were overwhelmed by the complexity. Hours were spent on basic tasks, and the same questions kept coming up again and again. Why was design so difficult? Why did something so visual require so much technical training? For Melanie, it was more than just a classroom problem. It was a design flaw in the tools themselves, and in the way creative work was being taught, accessed, and imagined. She began to wonder, what if anyone could design something beautiful without needing to learn dozens of menus and shortcuts? It's fascinating to reflect on how many major shifts begin with small frustrations, quiet moments when something just feels harder than it should. For Melanie, that question didn't fade. It grew, and eventually, it became the seed of an idea that would lead her far beyond her campus in Perth. But at first, she didn't try to take on the design world. She started much smaller, with a niche idea focused on high school students and one specific product. That small beginning would quietly lead her toward one of the most valuable private companies in the modern tech landscape. In the next part, we'll step into the very first version of Melanie's vision. A modest startup built with her boyfriend in their living room, focused entirely on school yearbooks. Melanie didn't have venture capital. She didn't have a network of founders or access to startup accelerators. But she had something equally powerful: a clear frustration, a strong intuition, and someone to build with. That someone was Cliff Obrecht, her boyfriend at the time and a fellow student. Together, they decided to focus not on general design at first, but on a single, manageable market: school yearbooks. They called their first product Fusion Books. It was a simple online platform that allowed students and teachers to design, customize, and print their own yearbooks. The idea was modest, but it was also practical. In a world where layout software was expensive and required training, Fusion Books offered something new: simplicity. The couple worked from Melanie's mother's living room. With no external funding, they handled everything themselves, from development to customer service to printing logistics. It was not glamorous, and it was certainly not fast, But slowly, Fusion Books found its audience. Schools appreciated how much easier it made the yearbook process. No more emailing files back and forth, or wrestling with complex design programs. Everything was online, intuitive, and collaborative. This small win mattered. It proved two important things. First, that there was real demand for simpler design tools. And second, that Melanie and Cliff could build and deliver them, even without backing or fanfare. By 2010, Fusion Books had spread across Australia and had even started gaining traction in France and New Zealand. It was still small, but it was growing. And more importantly, it was teaching Melanie a valuable lesson. When you make design easier, more people create. It's worth pausing here, because this principle, empowering everyday users, not just trained professionals, would later become the heart of Canva's mission. But at this point, Melanie wasn't chasing global disruption. She was solving a specific problem in a specific way, learning slowly through feedback and experience. Fusion Books was never meant to be the final product. It was a stepping stone, one that would give Melanie the clarity and confidence to take a much bigger leap. And that leap would soon take her into entirely new territory. It would lead her to Silicon Valley, where she would pitch an idea few investors could initially understand. An all-in-one, browser-based design platform that worked for everyone, everywhere. In the next chapter, we'll follow Melanie's journey from local traction to global ambition, and explore the early challenges of explaining a quiet vision in a loud world. By 2011, Fusion Books had quietly proven its worth. Schools in multiple countries were using the platform, and Melanie Perkins had grown confident in something deeper than just a business model. She had glimpsed the possibility of something much larger, a design platform that could work for anything, not just yearbooks. The idea had matured in her mind, a drag-and-drop tool, fully online, that allowed anyone to design anything. Presentations, posters, resumes, social media graphics, all without the steep learning curve of traditional software. But this vision required resources well beyond what she and Cliff could build from their living room. They needed engineers, infrastructure, and a way to scale globally. And for that, they would need funding. So Melanie made a bold decision. She booked a ticket to Silicon Valley. It's hard to overstate how unlikely this move was. At the time, Melanie was in her early 20s, with no formal background in technology or venture capital. She had never lived outside Australia. She had no network in California and no inside connections to the startup world. What she had was an early prototype, a pitch deck, and a belief that this idea could change how people interacted with visual information. The first meetings were difficult. Investors were skeptical. They listened politely, but many simply did not understand the concept. Some questioned why users would ever stop using tools like Adobe. Others doubted that something as complex as design could ever be simplified to the level she envisioned. And underneath the polite resistance was a deeper bias, the kind that many female founders quietly face. Melanie later recalled how frequently she was overlooked in rooms, how often technical questions were redirected to male team members, even when she was the one leading the idea. The rejections came often, and they came fast. But what's striking is how calm she remained. Melanie didn't pivot wildly. She didn't abandon the core vision. Instead, she refined her pitch, clarified the product, and kept searching for someone who could see the world the way she did. Eventually, that person arrived, not as an investor, but as a former Google engineer named Cameron Adams. Cameron had worked on Google Wave, an ambitious real-time collaboration tool. He understood what Melanie was trying to build. More importantly, he shared her belief that design could be made radically more accessible, not by simplifying creativity, but by removing the barriers to it. In the next part, we'll watch how this meeting changed everything, and how the quiet formation of a founding team would set Canva on a new path, one that began not with capital, but with shared conviction. Cameron Adams had not been looking for a startup. After his time at Google, he was focused on building tools that mattered, with a special interest in visual communication. But when Melanie reached out to him, something about the vision felt different. Not just the product itself, but the calm clarity with which she described it. Her idea wasn't to compete with Adobe. It was to create a new layer of design, one that lived in the browser, worked intuitively, and invited more people into the creative process. A platform, not just a tool. Cameron was intrigued. He met with Melanie and Cliff in Sydney to explore further. The meetings were quiet, thoughtful, and focused not on growth or valuation, but on product experience and user psychology. They spoke for hours about interface design, learning curves, collaboration flows, things that rarely came up in pitch meetings. Over time, Cameron became convinced. He didn't just believe in the concept, he believed in the way Melanie wanted to build it. In 2012, he joined the founding team as Chief Product Officer. This moment marked a turning point. With Cameron on board, the technical vision of Canva became tangible. He brought deep experience in user interface design and product systems, the kind of thinking that could turn Melanie's vision into a working platform. But there was still one challenge: funding. Even with a strong team and a clear product plan, the fundraising process remained slow. Many investors remained cautious. Canva didn't fit the typical mold of a high-growth startup. It was based in Australia, it wasn't driven by aggressive monetization, and its founders were focused on long-term utility rather than short-term metrics. Eventually, though, patience paid off. Bill Tai, a prominent venture capitalist with experience in early-stage tech, agreed to invest. He saw what others had missed: the quiet depth of the idea and the rare combination of product clarity and user empathy. Tai invited Melanie to join one of his startup kite surfing retreats in Hawaii, a now legendary gathering of founders and investors. Melanie went not to network loudly, but to listen, observe, and keep refining the Canva vision. More introductions followed, connections deepened, and slowly over time, Canva raised a modest seed round. By the end of 2012, Melanie, Cliff, and Cameron had a small team, early funding, and a shared mission to simplify the entire process of visual communication, from idea to execution. It's fascinating to consider how many stories begin not with disruption, but with patience. Canva didn't explode out of a garage. It grew gently, through alignment and persistence, shaped more by listening than by noise. In the next chapter, we'll watch the first version of Canva go live and explore how its quiet interface hit a powerful new model of collaborative design. The year was 2013. After months of product development, quiet testing, and dozens of interface refinements, the Canva team felt ready to share their work with the world. But there would be no media spectacle, no dramatic unveiling, just a quiet public launch of a design tool unlike any other, simple, browser-based, and built for everyone. The product itself reflected the mindset of its founders. Canva was clean, intuitive, and surprisingly light. It didn't ask users to learn design. It simply let them start. Templates were built in. Fonts, layouts, and image tools were easy to find. The interface invited exploration, not instruction. At first, the launch reached a modest audience. A few thousand early users, many of them teachers, marketers, and small business owners. but the response was immediate and clear. People were grateful. They didn't just use Canva, they lingered, they told friends, and they kept returning, not because they had to, but because the process felt enjoyable. Designing no longer felt intimidating. It felt accessible. The early analytics told a subtle but powerful story. Users who tried Canva once tended to come back often. Session lengths were long, projects increased over time, and feedback poured in, not about missing features, but about how easy it was to begin. This was new. Design platforms had always chased power. Adobe Suite was full of capabilities, used by professionals around the world. But Canva did something else. It created psychological permission. It made people feel like design was for them. It's interesting to pause on this point. Many tech companies measure traction through numbers, downloads, logins, or revenue. But Canva's early traction was emotional. It changed how people felt about creating. It gave small businesses a way to look polished. It gave teachers the tools to make lessons visually engaging. It gave students the ability to present ideas clearly and confidently. And it did all this without training sessions or onboarding tutorials. Just a clean interface and a quiet invitation to create. In the next part, we'll look at the design philosophy behind Canva's interface and how small decisions made a big difference in user behavior, retention, and word-of-mouth growth. Behind Canva's ease of use was an intense focus on design psychology, the quiet science of how people interact with interfaces, how they make decisions, and what helps them stay engaged. Melanie, Cameron, and the team knew that simplicity wasn't just about fewer features. It was about clarity, flow, and emotional comfort. Every part of the Canva interface was crafted to reduce hesitation. When a user opened a blank project, they weren't met with rows of icons or dense menus. Instead, they saw ready-made templates, clear typefaces, and a welcoming visual hierarchy. The question wasn't, how do I start? It was simply, which style do I like? This small shift had a large effect. By removing decision fatigue and technical anxiety, Canva created a sense of momentum. Users moved from idea to design in seconds, not minutes. They didn't have to learn before creating. They learned through creating. Drag and drop functionality replaced complex alignment tools. Color palettes and font pairings were suggested automatically. Image libraries were embedded, so users didn't need to search externally. And because everything lived in the browser, there were no downloads, no updates, and no version conflicts. The result was an unusually high activation rate. People started and finished designs quickly, but more importantly, they returned. Canva wasn't just usable, it was enjoyable. Word of mouth began to spread quietly, especially among non-designers. Teachers used Canva for classroom materials. Startups used it for pitch decks. Bloggers used it for thumbnails and banners. And all of them felt like they were doing something creative, often for the first time. It's fascinating to consider how powerful it can be to remove friction. In many industries, innovation is measured in complexity, but Canva proved that the real breakthrough often lies in subtracting, not adding. As user growth increased, Canva didn't rush to monetize. There were no pop-ups, no hard paywalls. Instead, the free tier remained generous, with optional premium features introduced gently over time. By the end of Canva's first year, it had over 750,000 users, a number that grew not from ad campaigns, but from quiet recommendation. And through it all, the product never lost its tone, welcoming, accessible, and quietly capable. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Canva expanded its ecosystem, building a team, opening international offices, and scaling the platform while preserving its original design philosophy. By 2015, Canva was no longer just a helpful design app. It was becoming something more, a living platform, shaped by millions of users around the world. And with that growth came new questions. How do you scale without losing clarity? How do you grow fast without becoming chaotic? For Melanie Perkins, these were not technical questions. They were cultural ones. Canva's growth had been built on empathy, understanding what users needed before they asked for it. Now, as the team expanded beyond a small core group, that same approach had to guide internal decision-making. Hiring, product development, internationalization, all of it needed to reflect the calm, focused spirit that had made Canva feel different. The company began expanding its engineering and design teams, bringing in talent from Australia, the United States, and Southeast Asia. New roles were created, but hierarchy remained flat. Transparency was encouraged, and most decisions still passed through a single filter. Does this make design easier? It's worth pausing here. Many startups grow by chasing feature parity. They add complexity to compete with established players. Canva chose the opposite path. It kept its interface simple, but made the platform itself more capable. Through integrations, templates, and collaborative features that didn't overwhelm the user. The team also began translating Canva into new languages. This wasn't just a technical upgrade. It was part of a broader mission to make visual communication accessible across cultures. As new users joined from Latin America, Asia, and Europe, the platform adapted quietly. Templates were localized, fonts expanded. Even the color palettes began to reflect cultural nuances. Meanwhile, Canva's user base was shifting. What began with teachers and students now included marketing departments, nonprofits, e-commerce businesses, and even government agencies. The tool was being used for brochures, reports, social campaigns, internal communications, often in places where no designer had been involved before. And still, the original simplicity remained. Canva's user growth continued to climb steadily, not in explosive spikes, but in quiet waves. People came for a single task. They stayed for the ease. And soon, Canva was not just a design platform. It was becoming a daily habit. In the next part, we'll explore how Canva built a business model around this momentum, one that focused less on extraction and more on enabling value at scale. As Canva's user base grew into the millions, the next natural step was monetization. But Melanie Perkins and the team approached this phase carefully. From the beginning, Canva's mission had been about access, about lowering the barrier to creativity, not raising it through paywalls or complexity. So instead of locking features behind subscriptions or limiting functionality for free users, Canva chose a more gradual path. The platform remained broadly accessible, with a generous free tier that included thousands of templates, fonts, and graphics. Canva Pro, introduced as a premium subscription, was designed not to gatekeep, but to extend value. It offered additional tools for teams, branding kits, larger media libraries, and time-saving features like one-click resizing and background removal. The key was that nothing about the core experience was removed. For most users, Canva remained complete and functional, even without payment. This approach reflected Canva's understanding of its audience. Many users were not designers by profession. They were teachers, students, small business owners, and nonprofits. They valued ease more than depth, and they were more likely to recommend a product that didn't pressure them into upgrades. In this way, Canva turned trust into growth. Word of mouth remained Canva's strongest marketing channel. Entire school districts adopted the tool without sales teams. Businesses started using it organically, only later upgrading to Pro as needs grew. Even large enterprises began to notice, with marketing departments integrating Canva for internal presentations and branded content workflows. Meanwhile, Canva expanded its revenue model gently through a design marketplace. Contributors, illustrators, photographers, and template creators could license their work to Canva's paid users, earning royalties. This not only diversified Canva's offering, it also created a quiet creator economy inside the platform. By 2019, Canva had reached a meaningful revenue milestone. It was profitable, and it had done so without heavy advertising, without intrusive monetization, and without disrupting the simplicity that had made it successful in the first place. It's worth reflecting on how rare that is in the world of software as a service. Canva didn't push users towards subscriptions. It invited them, softly, gradually, and with a clear value exchange. It treated monetization not as a funnel, but as a relationship. And in doing so, it turned quiet satisfaction into sustainable business growth. In the next chapter, we'll follow Canva's deeper expansion into mobile apps, real-time collaboration, and the subtle transformation from a tool for individuals into an ecosystem for teams and enterprises. By 2020, Canva had become more than just a tool. It was part of the daily rhythm of millions of people, from schools and nonprofits to startups and marketing teams. It had quietly embedded itself into how people worked, communicated, and created. But now, a new challenge was emerging. As users grew more comfortable creating with Canva, they also began to ask, how do we create together? The answer would shape Canva's next phase, the shift from a solo design platform into a collaborative workspace. Unlike traditional design tools, which were often installed on individual computers and built for one designer at a time, Canva had always lived in the browser. That gave it a natural advantage. Real-time collaboration didn't need to be added. It could be built into the foundation. The team began developing features that mirrored the best of cloud-based productivity tools. Multiple users could now work on a design at once, editing text, moving elements, sharing comments. Projects could be organized in folders. Permissions could be set by role. Version history allowed for smooth revision. These weren't flashy upgrades, but they quietly changed how Canva was used. Suddenly, it was more than a creation tool. It was a shared visual language. A marketing team could build social assets together. A teacher and student could co-design a presentation. A nonprofit could draft an outreach campaign with volunteers across continents. And all of it happened in real time, with no software installs or compatibility issues. At the same time, Canva began focusing on mobile. Many of its users lived in regions where the smartphone was the primary computing device. Others were using Canva during commutes, between meetings, or on the go. So, the mobile app was redesigned for touch, keeping the interface clean, responsive, and easy to use on small screens. It wasn't about replicating the desktop experience. It was about translating the same calm utility into a new form. The result was another quiet expansion, not driven by hype or feature announcements, but by habit. More people were using Canva more often, in more places, for more purposes. It's fascinating to reflect on how Canva's collaborative shift wasn't about productivity in the traditional sense. It wasn't about speed or output. It was about connection, giving people the ability to shape ideas together, no matter where they were or what tools they had. In the next part, We'll explore how this shift into team-based workflows led Canva to rethink branding, asset management, and how large organizations could maintain visual consistency without slowing down creativity. As Canva became a shared space for creation, a new type of user began to emerge, not just individuals or small teams, but entire organizations. Schools, startups, nonprofits, and even global corporations started using Canva, not just for one-off designs, but as a central part of their visual communication process. With this shift came a familiar tension. How do you keep design open and accessible while also protecting brand consistency? Canva's answer was not to limit freedom, but to provide gentle structure. The team introduced brand kits, a quiet but powerful feature that allowed organizations to upload their logos, select their fonts, define color palettes, and create reusable templates. These elements weren't imposed, they were embedded, woven softly into the design flow. As users built new content, the system nudged them back toward consistency, not by forcing it, but by making it the easiest path. Brand kits helped solve a problem that had long haunted marketing teams. Traditionally, companies relied on style guides, long PDFs explaining rules and standards. But those guides were often ignored, misunderstood, or simply lost. Canva replaced that passive system with something dynamic, embedded, and collaborative. This was particularly valuable for distributed teams. A regional office could build a flyer that felt completely on brand, even without a designer's oversight. A volunteer organization could launch a social campaign using the right colors and logos, all with a few clicks. The boundaries of design had expanded, not through enforcement, but through enablement. Canva also introduced team templates, shared design frameworks that anyone in an organization could use. These made it easy to scale communications, ensuring that everything from business cards to pitch decks reflected the same tone and visual identity. What made this shift so effective was that it didn't create new layers of complexity. It built gently on top of what users already loved: the same drag and drop interface, the same intuitive logic, just with quiet scaffolding to help larger groups work in harmony. It's important to notice how rare this is in software. Most tools designed for enterprise use become more rigid, more cluttered. Canva remained calm. It didn't require training programs or onboarding teams. The platform still invited exploration, even as it scaled to support thousands of users within a single organization. By 2021, Canva was being used by companies like Zoom, PayPal, and Salesforce. Government departments adopted it. Schools and universities integrated it into classrooms. And all of this happened without abandoning the original promise: that design should be easy, accessible, and quietly joyful. In the next chapter, we'll look at Canva's rise in the broader tech world, including how it navigated valuation milestones, unicorn status, and a changing industry, all while avoiding the loudness that so often defines Silicon Valley's success. By 2021, Canva had crossed a symbolic threshold. What began as a startup in a suburban Australian living room was now valued at over $15 billion. Within a year, that number would rise to $40 billion, making Canva one of the most valuable private tech companies in the world. Headlines appeared, investors took notice, and for the first time, Melanie Perkins and her team found themselves at the center of global business attention. But the response from Canva's leadership was not typical of Silicon Valley. There were no extravagant launch events, no media blitzes, no fast-track acquisition strategies. The team made few announcements, and Melanie rarely appeared in press. Internally, Canva didn't restructure to match its new status. In fact, it resisted the very culture of high-growth tech it now found itself part of. Instead, Canva stayed committed to its original tone, quiet, clear, and mission-first. Even as new investors joined and valuation climbed, Melanie and Cliff retained tight control. They chose partners based not just on capital, but on alignment. At every turn, they returned to a core question: how do we stay useful? For Canva, growth had always been a byproduct of utility, not the other way around. Every milestone was seen not as a celebration, but as a responsibility. More users meant more needs. More revenue meant more opportunities to reinvest in access and education. And more visibility meant more pressure to lead by example, not performance. It's fascinating to reflect on how rare this posture is in modern tech. Most companies, upon reaching unicorn status, pivot toward aggressive scaling, global offices, rapid headcount expansion, new product verticals. Canva took a different path. It built slowly, deliberately, and with a long-term mindset. When asked about their success, Melanie often deflected credit, pointing instead to the team, the users, and the mission. She frequently reminded interviewers that the true goal of Canva wasn't to disrupt design or chase revenue. It was to empower as many people as possible to communicate visually. And this empowerment extended far beyond business metrics. With their rising valuation, Melanie and Cliff made an unusual decision. They pledged the vast majority of their personal equity to a charitable foundation. Rather than using their newfound wealth for private gain, they aimed to fund global initiatives in education, health, and environmental sustainability. This wasn't a headline play. It was part of a broader pattern, a kind of quiet integrity that had defined Canva from the beginning. From product choices to hiring policies, the company consistently asked not what's most profitable, but what's most helpful. Meanwhile, the product itself kept evolving. Canva Docs was introduced, expanding the platform into the world of text-based collaboration. New animation and video tools were added, helping users create everything from presentations to short-form content. And the library of templates, icons, and illustrations grew exponentially, all still accessible through the same calm interface. Yet, through all this, Canva never lost its essential softness. No matter how large the company became, it retained the feel of a tool built for people, not for markets. It continued to support teachers, small businesses, community groups, and made sure its features never excluded the less experienced user. By 2022, Canva had over 100 million monthly active users across 190 countries. It was available in more than 100 languages, and it had quietly become one of the most widely used design platforms in history, all without raising its voice. In the next chapter, we'll explore Canva's evolving position in a changing tech landscape, and how it continued to expand its platform while navigating global shifts in privacy, competition, and digital creativity. By 2023, the tech industry looked different than it had just a few years before. Artificial intelligence was reshaping workflows. Data privacy regulations were tightening. Remote work was no longer a trend, but a global norm. In this shifting landscape, most companies either pivoted sharply or fought for position. Canva, in contrast, remained centered, not static, but steady. This consistency became one of its greatest strengths. While other platforms expanded by acquisition or aggressive bundling, Canva deepened its offering quietly. It did not rush to compete on features. Instead, it refined them. Every new tool was designed with the same question in mind. Does this reduce complexity for the user, The arrival of AI-powered design tools across the tech space presented both an opportunity and a challenge. Platforms introduced auto-generative features, smart layouts, and AI-driven image generation. Canva responded, not with spectacle, but with care. It added Magic Write, a text generation tool, and AI-powered background removal. But unlike others, it placed clear boundaries around automation. The goal was not to replace creators, but to assist them gently. Where many tools leaned into algorithmic dominance, Canva continued to prioritize user control. Its AI tools came with clear on-off toggles, editable outputs, and calm language. There were no flashing smart prompts, just quiet help when invited. It's worth noting the difference. In many corners of tech, user experience had become a race to the most powerful features. Canva held to a different belief. That power should feel invisible, never intrusive. That creativity should remain personal, even when assisted by machines. At the same time, Canva began to address one of the industry's growing concerns: digital clutter. As companies amassed more assets, templates, and brand guidelines, many found themselves overwhelmed. Searching for the right file or image became a barrier to productivity. Canva responded by quietly developing a more intelligent content management system, allowing teams to tag, organize, and surface materials contextually. The platform also strengthened its role in remote collaboration. With hybrid work now standard across industries, Canva added smoother commenting features, live feedback loops, and expanded export options. Users could design together from anywhere, without relying on large downloads or platform-specific installs. These product updates, while subtle, reinforced a deeper trend. Canva wasn't just staying relevant, it was adapting on its own terms. Even in the face of rising competition, from Adobe's cloud tools to emerging startups in the AI space, Canva resisted the temptation to compete loudly. It continued to grow by being clear, calm, and useful. Perhaps most striking was how it handled its global footprint. With a presence in over 190 countries, Canva took localization seriously. It didn't just translate text, it adapted templates for cultural context, refined color schemes based on regional preferences, and worked with local educators to support design literacy. In countries like Brazil, India, and Indonesia, Canva became not just a tool, but a pathway to digital inclusion. It's fascinating to consider how scale can amplify tone. Most global platforms lose their original voice as they grow. Canva retained its softness, not by freezing its brand, but by embedding clarity and calm into every feature, support article, and help video. By the end of 2023, Canva had more than 3,000 employees across Sydney, Manila, Beijing, Austin, and London. But it still felt, in many ways, like the startup it once was. Meetings were held with light agendas. Product updates rolled out without fanfare. And the mission, to make design accessible to all, was more visible than ever. In the next chapter, we'll turn inward, exploring Canva's workplace culture, hiring philosophy, and how it quietly redefined what a tech company could look and feel like from the inside. From the outside, Canva looked like a global tech success, fast growth, a massive user base, soaring valuation. But inside, it felt different. There were no towering egos, no pressure to work late into the night, no race toward a public offering. Instead, the company operated with a rare kind of stillness. At the heart of this was Melanie Perkins, whose leadership style remained unchanged from the earliest days in her mother's living room. She believed that good ideas need space, that people do their best work when they feel safe, not rushed. And that clarity, not charisma, makes teams stronger. As Canva grew, so did the challenge of preserving this calm. Startups often lose their identity when they scale. Culture gets replaced by structure. Autonomy gives way to policy. But Canva resisted that drift, not by avoiding change, but by shaping it intentionally. Hiring was the first frontier. Every new team member was selected not just for skills, but for alignment with Canva's core values: to be empowering, to pursue excellence without ego, and to make complex things feel simple. Interviews focused less on credentials and more on collaboration style. Many hires came from non-traditional backgrounds: former teachers, nonprofit workers, freelance creatives. People who understood the needs of Canva's users because they had once been those users. Once inside, employees encountered an environment that was unusually flat. Canva didn't believe in long chains of command. Most teams operated with high trust, low control. Leadership was shared, decision-making was distributed, and success was measured not by output alone, but by usefulness. Did this new feature make someone's day easier? Did this update reduce friction? It's worth pausing here. In the tech world, culture is often an afterthought, a poster on a wall, a section in the investor deck. At Canva, it was the architecture. Even the office design reflected this. Open spaces, natural light, shared tables, no executive floor. Teams worked side by side. Transparency wasn't a slogan, it was structural. This openness extended to financials. Melanie regularly shared company updates with the whole team, including revenue figures and product roadmap changes. Everyone, regardless of role, was encouraged to contribute ideas, and often did. Another defining trait was Canva's emphasis on psychological safety. Mistakes weren't punished. They were studied, discussed, and sometimes even celebrated if they led to better systems. Feedback was expected to be kind, clear, and constructive. There was an unspoken rule. Ambition was welcome, but arrogance was not. Remote work, already part of Canva's rhythm before the pandemic, became deeply embedded afterward. Employees could work from anywhere, supported by a strong digital infrastructure and flexible schedules. Rather than worry about visibility, the company focused on outcomes, trusting that good people, given autonomy and clarity, would deliver great results. And they did. As the company expanded into multiple time zones, it also leaned into asynchronous communication. Meetings were used sparingly. Long documents and quiet decision-making became normal. The pace was sustainable, not reactive. The growth was steady, not rushed. It's fascinating to reflect on how rare this is. Canva proved that a tech company doesn't have to be fast to be successful. It has to be focused. It doesn't need aggressive goals to grow. It needs meaningful ones. And it doesn't need to mimic Silicon Valley to belong in global tech. It can define its own path, softly, intentionally, and with full belief in the quiet power of clarity. In the next chapter, we'll return to the outside world, to the millions of Canva users whose stories shape the product, and explore how their feedback, needs, and creativity continue to steer the company's evolution. From the beginning, Canva was built for people who were never trained to design. The teachers, students, small business owners, volunteers, marketers, and organizers who simply wanted their ideas to look good. These users did not speak in headlines. They did not post long reviews or attend design conferences. But they shaped Canva all the same. They shaped it with every template duplicated, every presentation shared, every flyer downloaded. They shaped it with the way they worked: fast, intuitive, curious, and with the way they reached out quietly to ask, could Canva do this too? This soft form of feedback became the core of Canva's product development. The team studied usage patterns not to increase time on platform, but to reduce friction. If users were taking too many clicks to complete a task, the interface was adjusted. If a feature caused confusion, it was simplified or reworded. And if something was missing, a file format, a template category, a keyboard shortcut, it was added quietly, without announcement. Much of Canva's evolution came from this silent collaboration between platform and people. The diversity of its user base was one of its great strengths. In Kenya, community health organizations used Canva to create illustrated safety posters. In Brazil, local restaurants used it to design menus and delivery flyers. In India, students built science fair presentations. In Germany, therapists used Canva to create worksheets for clients. Each of these use cases helped Canva understand a simple truth. Creativity is not a niche, it is universal. And when people are given tools that feel calm and clear, they use them in ways no designer could predict. To support this, Canva expanded its contributor ecosystem, inviting creators from around the world to submit templates, illustrations, and photos. These contributions were reviewed not just for quality, but for tone. Each asset had to fit the Canva experience, welcoming, clear, and versatile. The result was a platform that felt local everywhere, not because it was customized, but because it was open. Users could adapt it to their needs. They weren't forced to work in a certain way. They were gently invited to explore. Community became an informal engine for growth. In Facebook groups and Reddit threads, users quietly shared tips. On YouTube, tutorials appeared from teachers and small business owners explaining how to use Canva for lesson plans or product catalogs. In classrooms, Canva became a quiet ally. Not part of the curriculum, but always there when needed. It's fascinating to reflect on how rare this is in modern tech. Most platforms shape their users. Canva allowed users to shape it. This didn't just affect features. It influenced tone, pacing, and even the way Canva communicated. Product announcements were written in plain language. New features were rolled out slowly, with a "let us know what you think" at the end. Even Canva's Help Center was designed more like a conversation than a manual, with clear headings, calm layouts, and short, reassuring answers. No jargon, no urgency. This mutual respect created something unusual, trust, and trust in turn created loyalty. By 2024, Canva had users in nearly every country on Earth. It was used by global brands and village schools, by NGOs and wedding planners, by city councils and online creators. And still, it felt personal, because it had never stopped listening. The product had grown, yes, but it had grown toward its users, not away from them. In the final chapter, we'll reflect on what Canva's journey reveals about modern entrepreneurship, and why, in a world so often driven by speed, scale, and spectacle, a company built on patience, clarity, and quiet impact may offer a more enduring model. Canva began in a living room in Perth with no funding, no network, and no fame. It didn't arrive with a loud mission to disrupt, or with headlines declaring it the next big thing. Instead, it grew softly, out of a frustration, a question, and a belief that design should not require credentials. Its rise was slow, intentional, and built on decisions that, at the time, did not look remarkable. Make the interface simple, make the tools generous, listen to the users, protect the tone, be patient. And yet, when we look back across Canva's journey, from yearbooks to global enterprise tools, from 2 co-founders to over 100 million users. What we see is not just a business success. We see a quiet blueprint. It is easy to assume that business stories must be fast to be meaningful, that growth must be aggressive, that products must scale instantly, that disruption is the only measure of relevance. Canva tells us something else. It tells us that there is power in being early and then staying still while the world catches up. It tells us that trust can grow faster than advertising. It tells us that you can build a tech company with no drama, no slogans, no urgency, and still reach the world. But perhaps most of all, Canva reminds us that simplicity is not the absence of complexity. It is the thoughtful removal of it. That clarity is not shallow, it is deep. And that being accessible is not about catering to the lowest common denominator. It is about building tools with humility for people who have other things to do. This humility shaped every layer of Canva, from its visual identity to its internal culture to its pricing model. It showed in how Melanie Perkins led, how her team grew, and how each user felt invited, not converted. Even in moments when Canva could have turned louder, with its multi-billion-dollar valuation, its expansion into AI, or its global corporate partnerships, it stayed grounded. It kept offering tools that were, above all, usable. And it kept refining them quietly, never assuming that more was better. It's fascinating to think of Canva in this way, not as a tech platform, but as a kind of modern utility, as normal and frictionless as opening a notebook, as supportive as a good teammate, as calm as good software should feel. For many users, Canva is not a product they talk about. It's just something they use. And maybe that's the greatest measure of impact, when something becomes so quietly useful, so naturally integrated into life, that it no longer feels like a tool. It simply becomes part of how we work, how we share, and how we express. Canva never asked for center stage. It built from the edge, moved inward with care, and allowed others to do the same. And in doing so, it became one of the most widely used creative platforms in history, not by demanding attention, but by earning trust. If you enjoyed this quiet exploration, Sleeponomics offers many more stories to accompany your rest. Feel free to subscribe, and until next time, sleep well.